I'm recording. Hi, this is Beth Billings. Today is July 22nd, 2024, and we are starting our fourth sweater club. It is the Order of the Garter by Annamária Ötvös. It is a garter stitch top-down cardigan. I'm really excited about doing this pattern. I've done another pattern by Annamária Ötvös in the past. This is what it looks like. Very high tech here. I've done another pattern by her. It's a challenging, her patterns have some challenge to them, but which I'm happy to walk through all of the steps of with everybody in Sweater Club. But the final product is gorgeous, and she was a really great designer. She is unfortunately no longer alive. So she died several years ago, and she is not updated her patterns. There is no inclusive, like the inclusive sizing ends at a certain point, and so we can't ask her for editorial comment, which is too bad because she really was a very talented designer and I think quite a lovely person. So in her honor, we are doing the Order of the Garter, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I am planning on. The first thing, so because Sweater Club is sharing a paid pattern, and we're going to be giving commentary, we're going to be giving you support, but paying for the pattern is your responsibility, and having a copy of the pattern is your responsibility. We will not be sharing the pattern on this video. We will not be showing the pattern, but we will be talking through some of the steps that you need to do. And we're going to do that without giving a lot of proprietary information that comes from the pattern. We will share the picture so that you can see what we're hoping for, but I will not be showing you the text of the pattern in the videos. So if you need to get this, you would go to Ravelry. Share my screen. And sorry, I was looking at other things by her. So let me go back. So this is Annamária Ötvös's page in Ravelry, and this is the Order of the Garter. So you would go to Ravelry.com and search for the Order of the Garter. It's a $6.50 download from Ravelry, and then you'll have all of the information that we have. Okay, so to start, I want to talk a little bit about swatching for size, swatching the yarn that you've chosen. This sweater, as you can sort of see, is very much in the style of a Chanel jacket. It has a jackety kind of look to it, and sort of structured, but still a soft jacket. You can do it more densely knitted and make it much more jackety or coat-like. You can do it loosely knitted and have it be more drapey. It is done in garter stitch, which I think is one of the most comfortable and squishiest fabrics that knitting can produce. And it really holds its shape nicely. So I think it's going to be a fun pattern to do. We start with the back at the neckline, and we work down towards the underarm on the back, and then we hold those stitches, and then we're going to pick up and do the fronts one at a time until we get down to the underarm length, and then we proceed with the whole of the body and the back, the fronts and the back in one piece, and then later come back and pick up and do the sleeves. So that's the plan for this. So I just want to talk a little bit about swatching for gauge. You want to pick a yarn that's going to hold its shape, that a wool would be a good choice. And they recommended, the designer recommended one that gets 20 stitches to 4 inches. So that's 5 stitches to the inch. So a good choice for that, for me, one of my favorites is the Scout yarn from Kelburn Woolens. And so let me just show you what I've got so far. Switching to my document camera. So today, The Order of the Garter by Annamária Ötvös. We're going to talk about swatching, sizes, row gauge, and the German short rows, just so you know, so it's up there and nobody forgets. The next meeting is Monday, August 19th, and I'll talk about what our homework is before then. So just to talk about swatching a little bit, this is the swatch that I did on my size 6 needle. Size 6 is the recommended size for the pattern, and I was choosing a yarn that is in the ballpark. You can see that it looks a little bit cockeyed here, but that's because of my camera, not because it doesn't look as cockeyed in real life. Anyway, I cast on 20 stitches and worked in garter stitch after a little bit of a stockinette start. So I wanted to kind of frame it with something different. So I used a little bit of stockinette, but then I did 20 stitches up, and then I did some eyelets to indicate the size of my needle. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eyelets, and then I bound off. So my swatch is just about exactly 4 inches wide, just about everywhere I can measure it. In some places it looks narrower, and some places it looks wider. This, I think, is a distortion from the cast on, but there it looks like it's 4 inches wide. So just about everywhere I can move my ruler, it looks like to the nearest eighth of an inch, it's 4 inches wide. So that is the correct gauge for stitches for this. And this was on a size 6 needle. I did try it on a size 7 needle, and it was bigger. My stitches were bigger, and I didn't like it. So anyway, that's an example of how to do a gauge swatch. I cast on exactly the number of stitches, which was 20, and worked for the number of rows, which was 28. And then I did some extra rows at the beginning and the end, and marked them with eyelets to indicate what size needle I was doing. And the way that I made my eyelets, I was on the purl side. I purled 2 together, yarn overed for each number size of my needle. So I purl 2 together, yarn over 6 times, and then just purl to the end of the row, and then I bound off on the next row. So the thing is, in the pattern, the gauge is actually 20 stitches to 4 inches and 28 rows to 4 inches. And I just want to show you that this is my 28 rows from here to here, and it's not quite 3 inches tall. In fact, my whole swatch with my extra rows is not quite 4 inches. It's like 3.5. So my row gauge seems to be quite compact compared to my stitch gauge. My stitch gauge is perfect, and my row gauge is not. And there were a lot of comments in Ravelry about that. And so we talked about it a great deal in the group this morning. And I also looked at the Ravelry comments, and a couple of people said they added rows before the armhole shaping, and they added extra stitches to accommodate the difference in row gauge. Somebody else said that she works 70% of the desired length to compensate for the stretch of the garter stitch. So people were compensating for this row gauge question. But I think I might have stumbled on the cause. So I did a swatch of 20 stitches on the same needles. I'm doing it, I measure my swatches in stockinette on the wrong side because it's just easier to unroll them on the wrong side. But I just want to show you, this is the same needles, and it comes out to essentially 4 inches. Would be better. I just did this afternoon, but it's essentially the same width as my garter stitch swatch. Essentially, might have been in a hurry. And again, this wasn't blocked, but I want to show you the difference in length of the stockinette swatch. Here is just about 4 inches long. So I am going to posit a theory that the row gauge given should have, it said in garter stitch, but it looks like the correct row gauge for stockinette stitch. So I think if you get the stitch gauge, if you check it with a stockinette swatch and block the swatch, it may come out a lot closer. So I'm just saying that I don't know. I can't ask her. I would if I could, but I think that the row gauge may be a typographical error in the pattern. So I think that it's supposed to be 20 stitches and 28 rows equals 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And in the pattern, it says in garter. I'm going to say question mark stockinette. Over 100 people have done the pattern, and some people made no comments at all about it. So I don't know if they just ignored the row gauge, if they made adjustments for the row gauge. But as you can see, the row gauge might be correct. Look how much longer that is. It might be correct if it were a swatch done in stockinette. And the reason I think that it could be a swatch done in stockinette is in many patterns, the swatch is written for stockinette, even if that's not the stitch pattern. I mean, I've just seen it other times. So I just wonder. Okay. All right. I want to talk about the swatching. So we talked about the swatch. I cast on 20 stitches, so 2 swatch. You're going to cast on 20 stitches at least. And work all stitches as knit. Work knit for all for 28 rows. And then if you want to do at least 28 rows, again, you can cast on more, you can work more, but you want to at least have 20 stitches so that you can get a baseline. Because it's garter stitch, I don't think it's they talk about blocking, but with garter stitch, really it's a very stable fabric. It doesn't change a lot. So unless you have silk or some other combination material in your yarn, I don't think you have to swatch too thoroughly. Like I barely ever swatch garter stitch because it just is such a stable fabric. And the reason it's stable is because these horizontal rows are the backs of the stitches from the row before, and then they're identical on each side. And so there's just, unlike stockinette, which has only the fronts of the stitches, and so it rolls on the ends and it rolls in on the edges, and so it's very hard to tell what size that is unless you block it. So I'm not a big proponent of blocking garter stitch, but you certainly can. Okay, so if you cast on your 20 stitches and you work all knit for 28 rows, so every row all the stitches are knit, 28 rows, and then bind off loosely. And then you're going to measure across the center of that. And you can measure in different places, but as you can see there, this is my cast on, and it's a little bit tighter here than it is on my looser bind off. So I try not to make my measurement too close to the cast on or too close to the bind off. I try and do it right down the center and just use you can use a measuring tape, but I really like doing it with a rigid ruler instead. I just find it easier to do it. and I measure all of the stitches. So however many stitches you cast on, if you cast on more than 20, you want to measure across the whole thing, and you want to measure closest, bind off loosely, measure to the nearest 1/8 of an inch. So it's less than an inch difference, you know, you can decide which one it's the closest to. And so when you do calculations, let's say that it's 4 1/8 inches wide, then that would be 4.125. 4 1/4 would be 4.25. 4 3/8 would be 4.375. This is for using your calculator. So this is 1/8, 1/4, 2/8, sorry, 3/8, 1/2, 5, 5/8 is 0.625, 3/4. Oh, I can't do math. And 7/8 is 0.875. So let's say your measurement was 4 1/8. You're going to convert that to 4.125. You're going to divide 20 stitches divided by the number of inches, 4.125, and it's going to come out with your actual gauge. In other words, the actual size of your stitches in your swatch. So let's do math. So if your swatch was not exactly 4 inches, if it was 4 1/8, you would, 20 divided by 4.125, and that would give you an actual gauge of 4.84 repeating, which is different than 5 stitches to the inch. And so this is the number, the real number for your own swatch is the most important number that we can come up with. But if you come out with 20 stitches divided by 4, it will equal 5 stitches to 1 inch, which is the pattern gauge. It's the gauge that the pattern wants us to have. All right. So that's how we're going to swatch for gauge. To choose your size, I want you to measure around your bust. So that means measuring straight across the widest point on your bust measurement. If you have a wider measurement on your body around your stomach or around your hips, that's okay, but we're sizing this based on this measurement. In the pattern, there are bust measurements and shoulder to shoulder measurements given, and there's usually quite a significant narrowing of the shoulder compared to the bust, and that should fit well. It's one of those you're going to sort of have to try it and see. You can take another sweater that fits you the way that you would like this sweater. So it doesn't have to be a hand knitted sweater. It could be any kind of a sweater or cardigan that fits you in the shoulders and the bust the way that you would like this to measure. Lay it flat and measure from armhole to armhole to get an idea of what half of the bust measurement is, and then between the seams to get what the shoulder to shoulder measurement is. But those are the two most important, and the bust measurement to me is really the most important. So the pattern is written, sorry, with a number of sizes given. So to choose your size, you're going to measure your bust. And add 2 to 2.25 inches. These additional inches are for positive ease. Which means it doesn't fit you exactly around the bust. It's a little bit loose. There's a little bit of wiggle room in there. So for example, I measured my own and I was 41.5 inches around. And I'm going to add the most that I can. So I'm going to add 2.25 inches. And that gives me 43.75 inches for a desired finished circumference. But we're not making this, we're not using a pattern that's written to order. So I'm not actually creating the pattern for just my size. And so we have to look at the sizes that are given. So we're going to take this 43.75 example, and we're going to turn the page, and we're going to figure out which of these it's going to work with. So the sizes included for this pattern are extra small 1, extra small 2, small 1, small 2, medium 1, medium 2, large 1, large 2, extra large 1, and extra large 2. The corresponding sizes were 28 inches. These are circumferences. 30 inches, 32 inches, 34 inches. You might see where this is going. 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, and 46. Which is why I said this isn't really inclusive sizing. I mean, it goes down to quite a small size here, but 46 is not the largest size. And I'm already sort of in the middle. I mean, if I use the sizes as written here, I'm already looking at an extra large one. But I want to just show the number of stitches that correspond with the bust measurement for each of these sizes is 164, 174, 184, 196, 204, 216, 228, 236, 250, and 258. So the pattern is written and ends up at the bottom of the armholes with this number of total stitches. So this is the number of stitches. So the gauge, if the gauge is 5 stitches to the inch, if I divide, sorry, I have to divide 164 by 5, my actual measurement that comes out is 32.8. So this is to fit a 28 inch and it comes out to 32.8. There's a little bit of overlapping in the fronts for the buttonholes, but you can see that it's slightly bigger at her specified gauge. It's slightly bigger than 28 inches around. And that happens for all of them. So this is 34.8. This is 36.8. And then it does a little funny thing because this is a different number and this is 39.2, 40.8, 43.2, 45.6, 47.2, 50, and 51.6. So the sizing gets a little bit more inclusive when you look at the actual measurement from edge to edge. In other words, if you were holding the fronts open, you had the fronts of the sweaters open, and here's the side seams and the other front, and you measured, and the armholes were here. And you just measured right across that whole thing. This is what those final measurements would be. So it starts to look a little bit more inclusive as you go from edge to edge. If you need a bigger size, my recommendation would be to use a slightly thicker yarn, one that gets more like a 4.5 stitch to the inch, or even one that gets 4 stitches to the inch. And if you divide 164 by 4.5, the difference is 34.17, or by 4, it's 41. So using a slightly thicker yarn changes these sizes dramatically. Oh, sorry, that's wrong. 36.4. And let's go across and do these. 38, 6, 7, 40.89, 43.56. So my point here is that if you need a different size, you can change the gauge of your yarn by making it with a thicker yarn, or adding something like a mohair to hold the stitches open more. Can't write numbers and talk at the same time. Hold on. 4, 55, 6, 57. So the last ones. Mm, 62.5 and 64.5. So with 4 stitches to the inch, the same pattern would be a much more inclusive size. Okay, so let's go back to the number we started with, 43.75, and I've got 5 stitches to the inch. So what I want to do is, that's my desired size. This is the closest one, and that means that this is the size that I'm going to pick to do with my gauge, because that's going to come out to the closest one to that. I could go up a little bit to that one, but I really feel comfortable that 43.2 is going to be better. I'd much rather have a sweater that fits well than a sweater that's too big. And so I'm going to choose this size. Hang on, my family is here and they're all having loud conversations. All right. So that's how I'm picking my size. Does anybody have any questions about sizing or picking a size?
So fairly basic question. I'm struggling to find out how many stitches there are that correspond to each of the sizes.
So these are the number of stitches. This row is the number of stitches, and these are the sizes above. So there's 216 stitches at the bust. This is not the cast on, this is at the bust in the
Okay.
pattern.
And if I were going back to the pattern to find the 216 stitches, where would I see that in the pattern?
You would see that on page, I think it's page 5. There's a little chart right
Okay.
after the finishing of the and again, I can't show that on the camera.
Sure.
It's the bottom of page 5. It shows the counts of stitches on the fronts. So you multiply that by 2 and then add the number of stitches on the back.
Okay. Got it. All right. Thank you so much.
So these numbers aren't actually in the pattern. I did the math
Okay.
for you.
Thank you.
But this is the total number again from edge to edge. Now, if you plan to do the buttonholes, you will lose a little bit of this. So I'm debating whether or not I'm going to do the buttonholes, which is why I'm picking a smaller size as well. I may either omit buttonholes and just have it be a plain fronted sweater with no closure, or I may do a loop closer to the edge so that I don't lose as much of the fabric. Okay, so I'm picking M2. So that means when I read my pattern, I am going to be reading the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 size. So the way the pattern is written, the extra small 1 is outside of the bracket. And then in the bracket is extra small 2, comma, small 1. Sorry, not comma, it's actually colons. And then the small 2. And then the 5th one is in italics. So the 5th, 6th, and 7th sizes. So the medium 1 is italicized. I don't know how to do that. Hang on. Make it go sideways. Medium 2 is italicized, and large 1 is italicized. So this is italics on these 3. So this is regular. And then the last ones are large 2. They go back to not being italicized. Extra large 1 and extra large 2, and then the end of the parentheses. So it's a big, long line of numbers. So my recommendation is you find your number, you count over, and it's the 6th from the end or the 5th from that end. And then you're going to go through either with a highlighter or a pencil, and you're going to circle that number anytime you see one of these long strings of numbers in the pattern. And that will make it much easier for you to find exactly what you're supposed to do. We have a tendency when we're reading patterns of reading the first number. I do. You may not, but I do. And then getting the wrong information. So I just want to make that recommendation to you for working on this pattern. The second thing is you're going to want to have some removable markers. And the pattern is written, I stuck them on the inside of my notebook. So this kind of removable marker is good. A safety pin is good. It could be a piece of yarn or a piece of string in the right colors. So I have red and blue here, and then I also have green ones. And you're going to want to have those removable markers. They're used to denote different points in the pattern. And then you're going to want a a circular needle or flexible circular needle large enough to do all of these stitches at some point, but you don't have to start with that length immediately, but eventually you're going to want to have that many stitches on your needle. So you might plan for that by having at least a 32-inch needle. Even though that's narrower than most people's circumferences, you can fit all of these stitches on at least a 32-inch needle. So I want to, I'm assuming that everybody can cast on. So once you've found your size and you're ready to cast on, you would go to the page 3 where the instructions begin for the upper body, and we're going to start with the back. And I just want to show you a drawing that I made of Blech. Let's see what I did. There. So the first thing we're going to do is cast on these stitches. And when we cast them on, there'll be a straight line. But you're going to, whatever your number is for the upper back cast on, these are the stitches you're casting on. You're starting here and you're casting these on. And then we're going to work some short rows, which means we don't just go back and forth across all of the stitches. In the first row, once we've cast on, we're going to work the right side row over to the left edge and turn as you normally do. And then we're only going to move part way back. And the place that we're going to stop is here. And it's denoted in the beginning of the pattern. So at the beginning of the pattern, it says to place a green removable marker or fasten a piece of waste yarn into a specific stitch, so many stitches from each edge. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like, because it may not be what you think. So this is my first piece. I've cast on and I've worked the first little bit of short rows. I've counted over the correct number of stitches from my edge, and I've put a green removable marker in that stitch. So this is not a marker like that would be on the knitting needle. This is like a safety pin or a piece of yarn that's gone through that numbered stitch, and it's gone through it there and on the other side. So in both cases, I've counted from the edge stitch, the number that they say, over and marked that one stitch with the green removable marker. So I have that in both cases. Bloop. I have to move my camera up. So that's the first thing you do after you cast on is you do that, and then you work one row. And then you're going to start working in short rows. And what a short row is, I'm going to demonstrate how to do it in just a second. But I just want to show you here. For example, here's your circular needle. So I've got 2 needle tips on either side, and here's all your stitches, and you're going to count in from each end and put that green marker on to the outside of the stitch. You're not going to put it onto the knitting needle. And then this is the setup for the short rows. You've got all those stitches. Here's row 1, and you're going to work all of them across. And then in row 2, you're going to work back just to that green marker. And then you're going to turn and work some stitches. And then you're going to turn and work some more stitches. And you're going to turn and work back some stitches. And then you're going to turn and work all the way over to the other end. And you're going to do that again, this little meandering path for 4 rows. And then you're going to work all the stitches. So for the first 12 rows, you'll see in the pattern, there's this specific information for how to do these two sets of short rows. The purpose is to create a sort of a lump at the top of the sweater. In other words, to create this neckline shaping for the sweater. So that's the goal of doing these two sets of numbers. Now you could just work 20 rows with no shaping at all, but then you wouldn't have this nice shaping at the back of the neck. So I do recommend it, and I want to show you my recommended way of doing the short rows. So the short rows are written to knit some stitches, let's say 5, and then, all of the other ones, blah, 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 blah. And then wrap and turn is the instruction. So knit, and they have all the numbers, and you're going to pick your number and you're going to knit that number, and then you're supposed to wrap and turn. I don't like the resolution of the wrap and turn. I don't like the way you have to hide it in the following row. And I prefer to do, instead of a wrap and turn, I prefer to substitute the German short row. So I want to demonstrate the German short, I'm going to demonstrate the wrap and turn, and then I'll demonstrate the German short row, and you'll see the difference. So on another piece of yarn, another piece of needles with another piece of yarn, I've cast on some stitches. And I decided that the cable cast on is a nice way to do it. The cable cast on is similar to a knitted cast on, except that you go between the stitches, make a new stitch, and put it on the needle. It makes a nice stable base, which is good for marking with your, so when you're marking the stitch, you're just going to be sticking that marker right through the base of the stitch, not on the needle. Okay, but it gives you a nice stable base. It's called a cable cast on because it sort of looks like a cabled rope. And then I want to demonstrate the German short row. So let's say I knit my blah, blah, blah number of stitches, however many that is, from row 2. This is from the wrong side of my work. So if you want to, you might want to mark the first row starts on the right side, and the second row starts on the wrong side. So I've worked over so many stitches, and they say to wrap and turn. So the wrap and turn is a short row technique that involves the next stitch on my left needle. To do a wrap and turn, you move the yarn, you move the stitch, you move the yarn back, and you move the stitch back. And when you turn, so you just reverse the needles, so you've got the working yarn back on the right-hand side, you just go straight into this one stitch. So the stitch that you wrap around is now on the right needle, and you just start knitting, and the next row, row 3, says knit so many stitches. So the problem that I have with that, I'll show you, is that I have to move my, hello. This is in garter stitch, so I'm going to move my yarn to the back ready to knit, and I'm going to knit so many stitches. 1, 2, 3. And then if I were going to, before I turn, I'm going to wrap. So yarn forward, move this stitch, yarn back, and move the stitch back, and then turn. So my problem with that is that I don't like resolving this very much. You could just leave it. So again, move the yarn back. But in the pattern, she says to knit, One, it's hard to see, so I often miss them. And 2, to resolve this, you're supposed to knit the wrap, which is this part of it, together with the stitch on the needle. And I just don't think that that makes a very nice looking stitch. That's me. So I'm going to go over to the end, And I'm going to resolve the other one and we'll look at it. So I know I've got a wrap coming up somewhere. I find it a little hard to know unless I put a marker right in front of the wrap stitch. I often have trouble finding it. So that's the stitch I resolved. And here's my next wrap stitch. And you can only tell it's just like a little double bump at the bottom. So again, you want to put your needle from the base into the wrap and then into the stitch. And then you have to pull it through both to resolve that wrap. And we'll just go to the end. So that creates this bump of stitches, and you do that 2 more times to get the bump. I just don't love how it looks. So I want to show you the German short row. So we're going to work over some stitches. And let's say this is the number that we're told to do. So I've reached the number that we're told to do. And then in the pattern, it says wrap and turn. Instead of wrapping and turning around this stitch, I'm just going to knit one. So you'll substitute to do the German short row. You'll substitute knit one where it says to wrap and turn. So you knit one more stitch. Did I do that? I think I did. Then you're going to turn. So you turn the work back to the other side. You slip that stitch, that first stitch, purlwise to the right needle. So it looks like that. And then I want you to take the working yarn and pull it so that the base of that stitch, those 2 legs, go up to the top of the needle. You don't want to pull it so hard that it goes all the way to the other side of the needle. You just want it to rest at the top of the needle. And then you're, with holding the working yarn like that, you're just going to go ahead and knit the next stitch. And what that does is it creates a double stitch. So you can see the 2 legs on the front and the 2 legs on the back. It's very visible. It has this kind of love knot at the top. I always think it looks like this, like your fingers are doing this. And then, okay, we're going to go back and do some stitches. And we're going to do, so let's say this is where we're supposed to wrap and turn. Instead of wrapping and turning, we're going to knit one more stitch, turn, slip the stitch purlwise back to the right needle, and then pull up, pull working yarn to create the double stitch. So you could say pull up the working yarn, pulling it up to there. And then you knit. Now, before you had to really see that wrap stitch, but now I've got this double stitch. So if I go into I'm going to work it as though I were knitting two together. So I go to the left of the second leg and I go into it normally to knit and I just work them together. Just go to the end on this one. And then when I resolve the other one, it's going to be the same thing. I'm just going to see it as a double stitch down the way, and I'm going to knit those two ends together. So it's a recommendation. It's not a rule. You don't have to do it this way, but I think that the German short row is a nice way to do it. And so then to resolve, work the double stitch. Like a knit two together. So to substitute the German short row for wrap and turn, when you see the term wrap and turn in the pattern, you're going to knit one and then turn the work, and the first stitch is what you would have wrapped on. So you need to slip that purlwise to the right needle and create your double stitch. And then you can resume working in the pattern. So if at that point, like if it said knit 5, blah, 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 wrap and turn, then on the next one, it would say knit 6, blah, 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 wrap and turn. So if you knit 1 here, then you would turn. And before you knit 6, you would have to slip 1 purlwise and pull up and make the double stitch. So that happens before the knit 6. Is that as clear as mud for everybody? I want to show you the one I've done so far. And then give you a little homework. So far, I've cast on my correct number. So I found my gauge, I picked my size, I've cast on my correct number, and I've done the first set of wrap and turns, or my first set of short rows. I did German short row. And so I'm looking at this from the right side because my series is on it's the right shoulder. Because when I'm wearing this, it will be this way and this will be on my right shoulder. So that's what the short rows look like as I'm proceeding. And now I'm ready to do the short rows from the other side. So I finished these wrap and turns, and then I made my last double stitch here and worked all the way back to the end. So for row 6, you end up at the beginning of your row again, ready to work a right side row. So that's where I am now. And I'm going to work to just here. And then I'm going to turn and I'm going to work back to here and then turn and work back a little bit further. And then I'm going to work all the way across, and that will be on row 11. So row 11 is still a short row because it doesn't start right at the end. It starts about here and it goes all the way back to the end. And then I'll work another number of rows to get to 20 total. At the end of that, I will be placing these markers. And I just want to show you. These markers go in. They go in place. So I'm working on this back. I've done my short rows here, and I've gone up to 20 rows, and it tells you to place a blue removable marker and a red removable marker after you finish the 20th row. And when you do that, this is what they look like. We're going to do that again when we do the fronts. And so these removable markers are in place because when you are picking up to do your sleeve, you'll start at the red one and work to the blue one on the sleeve pickup. And then when you do the other sleeve, you'll start at the red one because you always work from right to left. So you'll start at the red one and move to the blue one. So it's important to use them. And again, these are going to be removable markers like this, and you'll have gotten to 20 rows, and you'll be right at the end of that row, and you'll just attach the red one right into the edge of the last stitch of the row, the first stitch of the right side, and then you'll attach the blue one to the last stitch of the same row like that. And again, it doesn't have to be a safety pin. It could be a piece of yarn, but they're just going to live there, and you're going to keep working on those rows. Okay. Once those pieces are done, you continue to work to the bottom of the armhole. My pen went away. Come back, pen. So I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. This is the information at the top of, sorry, the bottom of page 3. So we've finished all the, I'm going to show you just one little part of the pattern here. The short row shaping at the back is now complete. So when we've done that, those 20 or those 12 rows, the short row shaping is back. Continue to work in garter stitch, knit on the right side and the wrong side for 8 more rows, ending with a wrong side row. Turn the work with the right side of the back facing, and then you place a red marker at the front and a blue marker in the last leftmost stitch. So that's what I was trying to show you, is you'll be facing the work and you'll have the red marker in the last stitch and the blue marker in, sorry, the first stitch and the blue marker on the last stitch. And then you're going to continue to work in garter stitch for a number of rows. And I just want to say, this is the bottom of page 3. And what I really want to say is, if we are wrong about the row gauge, at the point where you have worked the desired number of rows in the pattern, I want you to check there. So at this point in the pattern, if you have worked this number of rows, check to make sure that you have enough for the armhole, because like there's only about 12 more rows for the small until we're at the bottom of the armhole, which, you know, 12 rows here is 6 ridges. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's only about another inch. So for each of the sizes, there's a different amount of rows that you have to do. So for the small size, it's 6 rows. So 6 ridges. For each of the sizes, there's a different number of further rows for the shaping. And what they're doing is they're making stitches so that the bottom of the armhole will start to fan out. So it'll start to go out like this on each side. And if this is only 3 inches deep, that's not enough room for your arm. So the depth where you get to after those markers needs to be sufficient for your armhole. And the place to look for that is in the back of on the back page of the pattern. We have a schematic here. And it gives you different depths. So your depth, depending on your size, could be somewhere between 6.5 to 9 inches desired depth. So if you get to the final part of that instruction on page 3 and it's not within an inch or so of your desired depth, you need to keep working. How far should you keep working? Excellent question. The shaping the armhole instructions then goes on for a while. So I just want to show you, I broke it down, and so it says after you finish to row 20, work even to the bottom of the armhole. Working even means you don't add any more stitches, you just go straight. So you just work on the stitches that you have and you knit every row. And it tells you how many rows you're supposed to go in the pattern. But if you don't have enough, this is where you're going to need to add them. So you can use this information that I'm about to share with you to decide if you need to add more. So I counted this from row 21. I was making a mistake because I forgot about these other rows here, but it's still it's helpful to have numbers to refer to. So if the next row after you finish is a right side row, we're just arbitrarily calling it row 21. This is an increase row, and the increase is worked by knitting 2, making 1 left, knitting to the last 2 stitches, making 1 right, and then knitting 2. That increases the number of stitches in the row by 2, and the increases are 2 stitches in from each edge. The next 3 rows are knit all, and then the 4th row after that row is another increase row, the same as this one. And then you knit all, and then you increase, and that's for all sizes. All sizes go from row 21 to 27 with the same increases. But then size extra small 1, they're done with increases. Everybody else goes on. And after row 29, extra small 2 through medium 2, they go on, they skip down to 34. But large 1 through extra large does another couple of rows, and then they go to row 34, and then extra large 2 does 2 more rows, and then everybody's at 34 together. 34 is a wrong side row, and it is an increase row. And what I want to point out is that make 1 right is the opposite side. So it stacks underneath the make 1 right from the right side row. So it comes first because when you turn around, it's stacking under this one. So please note that the wrong side row reverses the order of the make 1s. So instead of being make 1 left and then make 1 right, in the wrong side row, it's make 1 right and then make 1 left. But otherwise the structure is the same. And then, having introduced this idea of increasing in every row, 35, everybody does, all sizes. 36, everybody does. But for extra small 1 and all the way through small 1, you are going to break your yarn at this point. You will work to row 36 and no further. So those sizes will have worked, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for extra small 1, 8, 9 more rows total. And for the small, it will be 11 more rows total. So you can see that depending on your size, there's a different total number of rows that will have been worked. And at the end, there should be this number of stitches on your needle, depending on your size, and you're breaking the yarn and putting on a spare needle. That is where I want everybody to stop, is at the end of that. And then we will pick up and do the right front and the shaping of the right front, and the left front will be the next class. I have written out this information in my notebook and created these notes that I am willing to share with the class, if you're taking the class with us through Sweater Club. If that's the case, so I have these notes, I can scan them and email them to you, but I need your emails to be able to do that. So if you're, because we don't do registration for Sweater Club, it's a free service, but I have some people's names and emails already. If you would like me to email this to you, I'm going to give you in the chat. The shop email is info@aroundthetableyarns.com. Just drop me an email real quick and say that you're taking Sweater Club and you would like these notes, and I will send them to you. I will send the scan to you. We meet again on August 19th. At that point, the back will have been done. On August 19th, we will work on the fronts, getting the fronts to the bottom. What we're going to try and do is get to the bottom of the armholes on both sides, both the left front and the right front. That will be the goal of that next session. And then we'll see how we do. But we're also going to talk about making buttonholes at that point. And then after that, we'll be doing the body. So in September, we'll be doing the body of the sweater, and I'm going to demonstrate how to do the afterthought or patch pockets on the body. And then in October, we'll pick up and do the sleeve caps and work on the sleeves and any finishing through the end of the month. So I'm being kind of loose with the plan because we'll see how we do. But the first step is to get the backs shaped, get the upper back part done. Any questions? Silence. All right.
I just need an email from you. That's all.
All right. So I will send one to you, Maureen, and then Shelly, send me your email if you'd like that. Have Maureen's.
Yeah, I'll put it up against the pattern.
Oh, good. Thank you, Shelly. And then Kristen, Bobby, Kristen's sister. I've forgotten Kristen's sister's name.
Allison, yes.
Allison, yeah, if you can send them all in one, that would be great because I'll share them
Okay.
with you each individually. And then sorry, I came home from a vacation 2 days ago and I'm still a little bit spacey. And once we get past 7 o'clock, I'm like, time to go sleep in it. Because I have jet lag. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop the recording.